Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I'm unable to use my own voice at the moment, so for now I'll be narrating with a premium AI voice. I appreciate your understanding and support.
Chapter 4111, The First Leader, II. Before Noah could respond, she turned her attention to Vexthal, her expression growing serious. I just returned from the neighboring Rani tribe. Half their hunting parties have gone missing. She paused, white flames flickering with agitation. The first leader Gilgamesh is expanding faster than we anticipated. Vexthal's casual demeanor vanished. Gilgamesh is moving truly. I thought it was all rumors. Syria replied, her voice carrying weight. He's offering something none can refuse, unlimited drops of everything, not daily rations but continuous flow. How can he produce such quantities? Vexthal asked, his massive form tensing. Even the eldest tribes can only. Syria's flames pulsed with uncertainty. The rumors say he's discovered something, a way to cultivate everything's at accelerated rates, and there's more. She hesitated, as if speaking it would make it real. They say the living spirit stands beside him. Vexthal actually stepped back, his crystalline skin flickering with shock. The living spirit? That's impossible. The living existences don't involve themselves in out matters. Yet witnesses from 3 different tribes report the same thing, a being of pure spiritual authority beside Gilgamesh, teaching him methods that shouldn't exist yet. Her gaze grew distant. If true, it explains everything. The living spirit could show him how to mass-produce everything's, how to bind loyalty through abundance rather than force. She glanced at Noah and Ozymandias. Keep your new pets close, Vexthal. Gilgamesh has been recruiting the weak, specifically easier to elevate, more grateful for power, more loyal to their benefactor. These 2 would be perfect candidates for his growing coalition. Of course, there are rumors that others have to give their blood in exchange for the chance to join them, if their blood is deemed not worthy. She never finished her words as she sighed. With that cliffhanger, she departed in a pulse of white fire that left afterimages burned into reality. Vexthal stood still for long moments, his eyes focused on horizons beyond the village. Move along, he finally told them, his earlier friendliness replaced by deep contemplation. As they continued walking, Kor's voice resonated in Noah's mind with recognition that transcended surprise. Gilgamesh, now that's a name that echoes through existence itself. He was the first early creature looked to as a leading force apart from the creature itself. Her consciousness fragment pulsed with ancient memory. When early creatures first began organizing into groups, most operated through consensus or might, but Gilgamesh proposed something different, leadership through provision. Why fight when you could simply offer more than anyone else? Why conquer when beings would willingly follow whoever granted them the most power? Her tone grew more contemplative. He was called the first leader because he was the first to understand that authority didn't require force if you controlled the resources everyone needed. In your era, this may seem obvious. But in the first folds, when every being was essentially a terrifying force unto themselves, the idea of voluntary subordination in exchange for benefit was revolutionary. She paused, processing the implications. I did not know that the living spirit was involved here. The living existences were supposed to be neutral above the conflicts of early creatures in the beginning. Noah absorbed this information while following Vexthal deeper into the village. A figure from the earliest myths of existence, potentially backed by one of the living existences themselves, building an empire of early creatures. Whatever happened to such a being? The question, Kor mused, is whether Gilgamesh's vision of unified early creatures under his leadership is progression or catastrophe. Unity sounds positive until you realize it means everyone serves one will, one vision, one interpretation of what existence should become. The words felt like a warning and lesson all at once. Vexthal's crystalline form moved through the tribal pathways. Each step left impressions in ground that had been compressed by eons of early creature passage, the very earth here denser than planets in Noah's era. The pattern keeper's usual jovial demeanor had given way to contemplation that made the air around him taste of concern. The village sprawled around them gloriously. Buildings carved from single stones that had witnessed the birth of concepts rose like monuments to what architecture could be when reality was merely a suggestion. The path they walked was wide enough for beings of Vexthal's scale, which meant Noah and Ozymandias looked like insects in comparison. Finally, after what felt like meaningful silence, Vexthal released a sigh. The sound carried exhaustion, the kind that came from realizing problems were approaching that strength alone couldn't solve. "With how weak you are," he began, his voice rumbling through frequencies that made Noah's bones resonate, "there's very little you can do to contribute." The words hung in the air. Noah's current complexity achievement that had felt monumental moments ago registered as barely noticeable against the likely hundreds of trillions these beings carried in their everyday existence. "For our tribe," Vexthal continued, each word deliberate, "contribution is everything. Effort is everything. Those who cannot contribute, who cannot exert effort that benefits the whole." He didn't finish the sentence, but the implications settled over them like a shroud. In a society where power was currency and everyone was wealthy beyond measure, what happened to those who had nothing to offer? Effort was everything. Noah's lips curved into the faintest smile at hearing this fundamental truth spoken so plainly. The seed of the first farmer, growing within his existence, pulsed with recognition. These were early creatures that had independently discovered what the principle of perpetual harvest encoded, that effort, not result, was the true measure of worth. Vexthal's massive head turned slightly, crystalline features suddenly brightening with the particular expression of someone who had just solved an irritating problem. "Ah, you can do that?" "Hum." The enthusiasm in his voice created small aurora in the air, his mood shift so sudden that reality had to scramble to adjust. He led them toward what Noah initially perceived as another building, but as they approached, his perception revealed it to be something far more complex. A transparent dome of light rose before them, its surface rippling with distortions. Space and time twisted around it like fabric being wrung by invisible hands. Inside, impossibility had been made practical. Light years' worth of space had been compressed into an area that appeared no larger than a city block from the outside. And filling this compressed space, mountains and valleys and entire geographical features of it, was manure. The sheer scale defied comprehension. Mountain ranges of dung rose toward skis that existed inside a bubble. Valleys carved by rivers of liquid waste wound between hills of compressed feces that had fossilized. The stench was mercifully contained by the dome, but even seeing it made Noah's enhanced senses attempt to shut down in self-defense. "These," Vexthal announced with the pride of someone showing off treasured resources, "are the excrements of the cow of fertility." Chapter 41:12 A chef. He gestured toward the mountains of waste with enthusiasm that suggested he was displaying gold rather than dung. Extremely helpful in growing and nurturing herbs, the compression process concentrates the life-giving properties while eliminating the less useful aspects. He began listing names with the casual expectation that they would mean something. You can sort it into small compartments and bring it to creatures Nezan, Dajoxan, Ewa. Each name was spoken with familiarity that suggested long association, relationships that had persisted through epochs Noah couldn't imagine. But, sorting shit. Noah's eyes flickered with an expression that went beyond disbelief into something approaching existential insult. His second journey to the earliest folds, his accumulation of power that defied reason, his survival of beings that shouldn't exist, all to become a dung organizer. He understood it. This dung was likely extremely unique, as he would definitely want it for himself. But before that, his gaze swept the surroundings, seeking alternatives. The village stretched in all directions, surely offering other opportunities for someone of his unique capabilities. To the far right, past structures that defied architectural possibility, his eyes caught something that made him pause. A massive table, though calling it a table was like calling an ocean a puddle. The surface alone could have hosted cities, carved from wood that had grown before growth was properly defined. Upon this table lay a corpse. It was a dodo, but to call it simply that was to insult the magnificent impossibility of its existence. Even headless, its neck terminating in a clean cut that suggested violence of incomprehensible scale, the creature radiated power that made Noah's recent achievements feel like a child's first steps. The complexity emanating from the dead flesh exceeded Duke Gwendolyn's careful accumulation. The table stood before a cave structure that had been carved into or perhaps through a hill that might have been a sleeping titan. The entrance yawned wide enough to swallow buildings, darkness within suggesting depths that connected to spaces that shouldn't adjoin. Standing at the table was an early creature whose very presence redefined what butchery meant. The early creature wielded a blade that lesser civilizations would have worshipped as a weapon of endings. The weapon was the size of a building, yet in his granite hands it moved with the precision of a scalpel. He worked with methodical efficiency that suggested infinite practice. Each cut separated meat from bone with understanding that transcended anatomy. Other early creatures gathered around, catching chunks of meat he threw. They consumed the raw flesh while maintaining conversations. The casualness of it all! Beings who could unmake existence itself, treating raw dodo meat like afternoon snacks, meat from a Duke-level entity, created a surreal domesticity that would make one struggle to compare it to the current age. "What about that over there?" Noah asked. Vexthal's crystalline eyebrows rose with skepticism that reshaped local probability. "What about it?" The question carried genuine confusion, as if Noah had asked why water was wet or why existence existed. "The job of butcher is one that creature Garvin excels at. You wouldn't be able to do it better." He paused, his massive eyes each one containing depths that suggested infinite crystal recursion, focusing on Noah's comparatively insignificant form. "With your power, you cannot even cut the animals, can you?" The doubt in his voice wasn't mockery but a genuine question. The complexity differential between Noah and even the dead dodo was like asking an ant to carve a mountain using wishes. Under that doubtful gaze, Noah's eyes pulsed. "We won't just be able to butcher," he stated with certainty, "but we'll do something with our weak hands that will make the experience that much more enjoyable." Vexthal's expression cycled through skepticism, amusement, and finally settled on indulgent curiosity. He shook his massive head, creating small atmospheric disturbances, but his smile suggested he was willing to humor this impossible claim. They walked toward the butchering station, their approach drawing attention from the gathered early creatures. As they neared, Vexthal performed what was clearly a formal greeting. His massive hand rose to his chest and tapped 3 times in a pattern that created resonance through dimensions. The gesture left a brief signature in the air, a mark of his existence that would linger for moments before reality reabsorbed it. It was greeting, identification, and respect all encoded in simple motion. "Garvin," Vexthal called, his voice carrying across space with the authority of someone who belonged here. "These 2 weak little things want to prove themselves. Can you give them a chance here?" Creature Garvin paused in his butchering, his form turning with the deliberate motion of a mountain deciding to notice something. Up close, Noah could see that his body wasn't just granite-like, it was granite that had achieved consciousness and decided to try being alive. His eyebrow rose with skepticism that created local gravitational anomalies. Then he laughed. The sound redefined what laughter could be. The laughter created visible ripples in space, each wave carrying amusement. With a motion that created earthquakes, he sank his massive butcher knife into the table. The blade penetrated the impossibly hard wood with ease. "Let them be my guests," he boomed, his voice carrying undertones that made stone resonate. "If they can even lift the blade, bahaha." The other early creatures joined his laughter, their combined mirth creating a symphony that would have driven lesser beings mad. They continued eating raw meat with the casualness of beings for whom cooking was unnecessary. "Raw." The word echoed in Noah's mind with the particular resonance of opportunity recognized. They were eating it raw, not from necessity but because nothing had suggested they should do otherwise. His eyes ignited with inspiration that made his companions notice. "Thank you for giving us a chance," he said. "We, creatures Osmont and Ozymandias, wish to show you something unique." The formal introduction using their assumed titles created a ripple of amusement through the gathered beings. They smiled with indulgence that parents might show children attempting something adorably impossible, continuing their conversations while occasionally glancing over to see what these weak little things might attempt. Their casual strength created an atmosphere of suppressed violence. Not intentional threat, but simply the reality that beings of such power existing in proximity to lesser creatures created danger through presence alone. A playful gesture from any of them, a friendly pat that exceeded careful control, would obliterate the strongest dukes Noah had encountered without the early creature even noticing they had killed something. It was fucking overwhelming. These were early creatures. Noah and Ozymandias positioned themselves at the head of the butchering table, the massive dodo corpse stretching before them like a mountain range of meat. This close, Noah could feel the complexity radiating from the dead flesh, power accumulated over epochs that made his own advancement seem like a single day's growth. Prompts materialized before his vision with urgency. Tremendous opportunity detected. Material: lesser primordial dodo deceased. Complexity: 52 847 293 0 18 447. Warning: subject exceeds safe interaction parameters by a large factor. Attempting to process may result in existential backlash. Potential harvest if successful: glorious waves of loot. Chapter 41:13 A Chef II. Noah read the prompts with shining eyes as he prepared to continue regardless. He closed his eyes, reaching deep into his early atlas of the folds, feeling the constellation of his towers of Osmont blazing within. Among them, one tower pulsed with particular warmth, the cooking tower of Osmont, containing the true source of cooking at stage 2. Begin, he commanded, the word carrying authority that made even the early creatures pause their conversations momentarily. Ozymandias responded instantly, his tentacle-form arm transforming into an obsidian blade that seemed to drink light. The transformation was perfect, a cutting edge that existed more as concept than physical object, sharpness given form through pure hunger. The blade descended toward the dodo's wing with inevitable certainty. The first contact revealed the true impossibility of what they were attempting. The skin resisted with the particular stubbornness of matter that had been drenched in trillions of complexity and purity. Attempting to cut entity with 52 plus trillion complexity. Success probability 0.1%. Recommendation: maybe abandon attempt. Abandon, that was not a word in his quintessential mind. HUUM. The blade of Ozymandias's hand suddenly underwent a transformation that made the watching early creatures lean forward slightly. Millions of microscopic jaws materialized along the cutting edge, not physical mouths but expressions of hunger so pure it had developed dentition. Each jaw expressed the same insatiable need, the same inevitable consumption that defined Ozymandias's existence. They devoured the very concept of resistance along the intended path. The blade became not weapon but argument, insisting that separation should occur, and reality, faced with such hungry certainty, reluctantly agreed. The sensation that flooded through their shared connection was overwhelming. Noah experienced hunger that transcended sensation. It was intoxicating and terrifying, feeling his other self literally eat through impossibility. With effort that made both bodies tremble, Ozymandias's blade completed its path. The cut was perfect, a single motion that had separated skin that could withstand supernovas. Meat that had accumulated power for eons, and bones harder than crystallized time. Monumental achievement, successfully cut 52 plus trillion complexity entity. Method: devouring conceptual resistance. Is your inevitability self actually your strongest weapon? Purity gained by Ozymandias, plus 250 000000000. Effort recognized by perpetual harvest. Bonus for impossible achievement, plus 50 00000000000. The severed wing portion fell to the table with weight that created ripples through dimensions. It was perfectly separated, the cut so clean that it looked artificial, as if reality had simply agreed to be divided rather than being forced. Noah's primary body erupted with power that made the early creatures' casual attention sharpen into genuine interest. Crimson gold flames burst from his form, but these weren't mere fire. This was the authority of cooking made manifest, pulled from the Tower of Osmont and given free rein. He channeled everything into this moment. Every point of complexity and purity he had accumulated, every understanding he had gained, every impossibility he had survived, all of it flowed into the flames that now engulfed the severed wing. Attempting to cook, primordial dodo wing. Target complexity, 52 847 293 0 18 447. Your complexity needs not be mentioned. Standard failure rate, 89 999%. Analyzing mitigating factors. Resistance of perpetual harvest, active effort multiplied. Seed of principle responding, authority reinforced. Atlas of the folds, supporting all towers contributing. Early creature heart, resonating fundamental authority engaged. Goad, educating reality being taught to allow this. Entire existence committed to this single task, how glorious. Recalculated success rate, 95.3%. Warning, failure may result in explosive decompression of complexity. Proceed anyway, of course you will. Noah's existence pulsed as he continued. The flames engulfed the wing portion and immediately something unprecedented began occurring. The early creatures who had been maintaining casual observation suddenly focused completely, their conversations ceased, their consumption of raw meat paused. They sensed what Noah was wielding to be a principle as they showed some surprise to Ihai's. A tiny fraction of it, barely a whisper of what principles could be, but unmistakably genuine. The weak thing had actually already grasped something like that. Noah focused on the task ahead and not on any gazes. The cooking process transcended simple heating. The flames convinced the meat that it wanted to be cooked, that achieving perfect doneness was its destiny. Proteins that had existed since before amino acids had names began reorganizing themselves into perfect structural chains. Each molecule aligned with its neighbors in patterns that maximized both nutritional value and taste. Fats that contained the memory of the dodo's million-year life rendered down into liquid gold that would carry flavor beyond what tongues were designed to process. Each portion of the surface of the meat achieved exactly the right degree of caramelization, creating a crust that was simultaneously crispy and yielding, structural and delicate. The process took seconds that felt like hours. Noah's perception stretched to experience every moment of transformation. He felt the meat's resistance give way to acceptance, then enthusiasm. It wanted to be perfect. Under the influence of the principle of perpetual harvest, even being cooked became a form of growth. Then, with a flash that made several early creatures expectant, it was complete. The wing lay transformed on the table, and the aroma that rose from it made even these ancient beings salivate. This wasn't merely the smell of cooked meat. This was the scent of comfort, of satisfaction before beings knew they could be satisfied, of home before the concept of home existed. The exterior had achieved a perfect bronze-gold crust that seemed to glow with its own light. The caramelization was so precise that each scale of former skin had become a tiny mirror, reflecting not light but the very concept of flavor. Wisps of steam rose from it carrying aromatic compounds that shouldn't exist, molecules that triggered memories of meals that hadn't happened yet. If one were to cut through that perfect crust, the interior would reveal a masterpiece of temperature gradients. The outer layer had been seared to seal in every drop of primordial juice, transitioning through perfect pink that deepened toward a center, maintaining just enough red to preserve the dodo's essential nature. The fat had rendered into pockets of liquid gold that would burst on contact with taste, releasing flavors that contained entire histories of evolution. Impossible achievement completed. Successfully cooked, primordial dodo wing. Quality legendary, perfect medium rare. Temperature achieved 30 million degrees Celsius at center, 75 million at the crust. Complexity of meal, profound. Note, cooking process has amplified base complexity by 42%. Due to monumental effort in cooking. Cooking Tower of Osmont progressing to Stage 3. Complexity gained, plus 200,000,000,000,000. Purity gained, plus 200,000,000,000,000,000. New title acquired, Chef of the Verdanaturnia tribe. The prompts came one after another as Noah felt his atlas buzzing, a tower roaring out and proceeding ahead as it became an even grander lighthouse that would illuminate the way forward. Item created, perfectly cooked primordial dodo wing. Prepared by Noah Osmont, early creature chef. Cooking method, principle enhanced searing. Doneness, medium rare, optimal for complexity absorption. Effect if consumed, plus 500,000,000,000,000,000 complexity. Effect if consumed, plus 500,000,000,000,000,000 purity. Additional effect, understanding of primordial tastes. Additional effect, temporary perception of flavor dimensions. Warning, consumption may cause existential pleasure. Outsider Core's voice resonated through his consciousness with genuine amazement. You continue to surprise me. Noah surprised himself as he stared at the perfectly cooked wing. His mouth actually watered, something that shouldn't happen to beings of his level. The biological response transcended his transcendent nature. Before he could move, before he could even consider tasting his own creation, a massive granite hand moved with speed that defied its size. Creature Garvin snatched the wing with the particular greed of someone who had just discovered something they didn't know they needed. He raised the wing to his mouth jaws that could have swallowed cities opening with anticipation. The early creature didn't nibble or taste, he consumed the entire wing in a single motion, teeth that could crush concepts, making short work of the perfectly cooked meat. The transformation was immediate and profound. Garvin's eyes, formations of living granite that had witnessed eons, suddenly pulsed with new light. His expression shifted through a spectrum of emotions that his face hadn't bothered expressing in millennia. Surprise at the initial flavor, delight as the complexity hit, something approaching euphoria as the full impact registered. The other early creatures had stopped everything. Every eye, organs that perceived across dimensions focused on Garvin's expression. He chewed slowly, deliberately, his massive form actually trembling slightly as flavor compounds that shouldn't exist triggered responses in beings that thought they had experienced everything. The golden fat burst across his tongue, releasing tastes that contained the dodo's entire evolutionary history compressed into sensation. The perfectly cooked protein delivered understanding, each bite teaching something about what food could be when elevated beyond mere sustenance. The silence stretched, reality itself holding its breath to see the verdict. Garvin swallowed, the motion visible as the food traveled down his massive throat. His eyes, now blazing with inner light that hadn't been there before, turned to Noah and Ozymandias. The weight of his gaze felt like mountains leaning in to look at pebbles. Then his attention expanded to include Vexthal and the other gathered early creatures. The combined focus of their interest created pressure that made existence question whether it should continue existing in their presence. They spoke in perfect unison, voices harmonizing across frequencies that shouldn't overlap, creating a single word that carried the force of existence itself. More. Boom. Chapter 41:14, A Glorious Symphony. The early creatures sought more, their unified demand still reverberating through local space. But what was truly remarkable was the nature of their observation. These weren't simple beings demanding food like hungry animals. Each one possessed over 10,000 Cleo's glyphs, their perception operating on levels that saw everything. They had witnessed Noah's entire process with perfect clarity. The flash of principle hadn't escaped them. That tiny fraction of perpetual harvest he wielded had been noted, catalogued, understood. But more interesting to them was the unique authority he had displayed. Cooking, one of them murmured, that should originate from living conceptual authority, should it not? They could see his methodology completely. With their terrifying power and accumulated knowledge, they could likely replicate what he had done within moments of trying. The patterns were clear, the energy flows obvious, the transformation of matter into elevated matter simply a puzzle they had already solved by watching. There were only a few parts they couldn't imitate that seemed to be unique to him. But if they truly wanted, they could now do something 80% similar. Yet they didn't. Their faces carried easy smiles, the expressions of ancient beings who had found something novel in existence that had long ago run out of surprises. This young early creature was teaching them something, not the technique which they had already grasped, but the joy of discovery, the pleasure of being served rather than serving themselves. They would not steal such methodology quickly. That would make the young early creature less special, and they were secure enough in their power to allow others to shine. It was the confidence of beings who knew they were already brilliant. They could afford to let smaller lights flicker without feeling diminished. Noah sensed this goodwill radiating from them like warmth from stars. He sighed internally, a complex emotion washing through him. Some early creatures, it seemed, were genuinely good, not kind by necessity or social contract, but good because they had chosen to be despite having the power to be otherwise. Since they held goodwill, he would return it amplified. He nodded toward Ozymandias, and his other self responded instantly. Both arms transformed into stellar obsidian blades with edges that weren't sharp but hungry cutting implements that achieved separation through consumption rather than division. Ozymandias began the arduous task of properly butchering the remaining dodo. This was methodical disassembly following principles of butchery. First, he separated the breast, two massive portions of white meat that would have fed armies. Then the thighs, dense with dark meat that had supported the creature's impossible weight. The drumsticks followed, then the wings' remaining portion. He carved out the tenderloin with particular care, that precious strip of meat that ran along the spine, tender beyond description even in its raw state. The back was sectioned, and finally the organs were set aside, Noah's eyes flashing brightly as he did not plan to use them. 8 parts in total, each one a monument to impossible biology. Successfully sectioned 52 plus trillion complexity entity. Effort recognized, unprecedented for your level. Purity gained by Ozymandias, +1 500 000 New distinction EARNED, early butcher. Effect, offensive cutting against entities below 50 trillion complexity, enhanced 10x. Devouring efficiency increased proportionally. This distinction will elevate with continued butchering of powerful beings. Current level initiate. Next level requirements, butcher 100 entities above 10 trillion complexity. Glorious sets of prompts arose as they caused one's eyes to water with majesty. Noah raised his arms like a conductor before an invisible orchestra, and reality responded to his gesture. The weavings of tyranny ring gloriously true. The symphony of the Protagonist echoes out in the verdant Eternia tribe. His existence buzzed as the Protagonist Tower of Osmont and Tyranny Tower of Osmont blazed within his atlas. Sounds that shouldn't exist began manifesting, drums that beat with the rhythm of stories yet to be told, trumpets that announced victories not yet achieved. The music came from nowhere and everywhere, a soundtrack to impossibility about to unfold. The 8 portions of dodo meat rose into the air at his gesture, each one surrounded by its own nimbus of crimson gold flame. This wasn't sequential cooking but simultaneous transformation, 8 instances of impossible achievement happening in parallel. The flames danced to the rhythm of the invisible drums, each beat making them pulse with greater intensity. The meat began its transformation, proteins reorganizing themselves in time with the music, fats rendering in harmony with melodies. 8 simultaneous transformations at 52 plus trillion complexity. Failure probability, cannot calculate odds this low. This is actually insane, but you're going to do it anyway, so let's see what happens. Even his weavings of existence, the distinction of the weaver of existence and the system of existence flowing through him, his infiniverse and early veiled shore which established truths and presented the challenges of existence in the form of prompts. Even this system doubted. And yet he went on. Dum dum dum. The symphony picked up tempo. The cooking process became performance art. Noah's hands moved through the air, conducting temperature and time like musical notes. Each gesture adjusted the heat on different portions, the breast receiving gentle flames that preserved its delicate nature, the thighs getting intense heat that would break down their denser fibers, the tenderloin barely kissed by fire to maintain its buttery texture. The symphony grew louder, more complex, as if existence itself had decided to provide accompaniment to this moment of culinary transcendence. Early creatures who had been approaching from other parts of the village stopped to watch, drawn by music that touched something primal even in beings that predated primality. His glyphs contributed as perpetual harvest bathed everything. His heart, his atlas, his towers, his everything, all of it contributed and burned fiercely like an engine. Cooking progress 25%. Complexity rising due to immense resonance. Cooking progress 75%. Warning: deliciousness approaching critical mass. Nearby early creatures beginning to drool. Cooking progress 100%. An astounding achievement, 8 legendary wonders born simultaneously. The music reached crescendo as Noah threw his arms wide, a swirling infinity symbol of crimson gold flames manifesting around him with the authority of cooking at its center. The 8 perfectly cooked portions hung in space, each one glowing with its own inner light, steam rising from them. Chapter 41:15, Measure of Growth. Creature Vexthul, Creature Garvin, and the others moved forward with shining eyes. Their massive hands reached for the floating portions with care that suggested they understood they were about to experience something transformative. They bit into the meat simultaneously, and the collective response was silence, the kind that occurs when experience transcends language's ability to describe it. Serenity and glory spread all around. Noah opened his eyes to witness rows of prompts cascading before his vision. Achievement: the Feast of Impossibility. You just cooked for entities that eat concepts of existence themselves. Such effort is profoundly awarded. Complexity gained plus 500,000,000,000,000. Purity gained plus 500,000,000,000,000. Cooking Tower of Osmont, Stage 3 achieved. New abilities unlocked, Conceptual Cuisine. You can now cook ideas, no really. Title evolved, Master Chef of the Verdanaturnia tribe. Respect level among early creatures, that young one can. Special recognition from Perpetual Harvest. This counts as effort in ways that is still calculating. Percent principle authority stabilizing. Actually make that to 1%. The principle itself is entertained. Final statistics for this cooking session. Total complexity gained, 750,000,000,000,000. Total purity gained, 750,000,000,000,000. Early creatures impressed, all those observing nearby. Manure sorted, still 0. Career path definitively established. Additional note: remember when you were worried about sorting shit. The early creatures continued eating with expressions of rapture that would have been comical on beings of such power if it weren't so genuine. They had tasted something new, the idea that food could be more than fuel, more than sustenance. It could be art. And oh, could a certain entity be artistic? Noah and Ozymandias settled onto the ground near the butchering table, their forms finally able to relax after the intense performance of cooking for beings that could unmake reality with thoughts. The nearby early creatures continued their feast with expressions of contentment that made the air itself taste sweeter. Noah could feel the complexity coursing through him like liquid starlight in his veins. Each heartbeat distributed the power further, integrating it into his fundamental existence. He pulled up his status to gauge exactly how far he had come. Noah Osmont, the early creature, age 190, 236,555 drops of blood. Total complexity, 4 237 293 847 291 4 trillion plus. Total purity, 4 237 293 847 291 4 trillion plus. Existence level, approaching Duke threat. Glyphs possessed. Cleo's glyph of the creature's first lesson, forehead. Seed of perpetual harvest glyphs X3, forehead palms. Total 4 active glyphs. Distinctions too many. True Emperor of Quintessence. True Emperor of Tyranny. True Emperor of Infinity. The early creature. Master Chef of the Verdant Eternia tribe. Member of Verdant Eternia tribe. The living existential guider. Tools. The goad rearing stick of existential education. Slipper of existential humiliation, left. Resistances, towers, heart, do you really want the full list? He was proceeding along gloriously as there were still 22 hours left. Beside him, Ozymandias's simpler status reflected his pure nature. Ozymandias, the purest hunger. Total purity, 5 973 938 572 910. Complexity, 0 converted to purity. Distinctions. Inevitability of recursive hunger. Early butcher initiate level. Member of Verdant Eternia tribe. Noah's attention fixed on one particular achievement within his existence. The cooking tower of Osmont had reached stage 3, and with it came an ability that defied comprehension. He could now cook concepts, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally take an abstract idea and transform it through culinary process into something that could be consumed. The implications were heavy. Could he cook the concept of victory and feed it to someone before battle, take the idea of understanding and serve it as a meal, cook the idea of order and feed it to Sigrid? There were many things to think of. But that contemplation would need to wait. Noah looked toward the content figures of Creature Vexthal and Creature Garvin, who were still savoring the lingering taste of their feast. Might I keep the slightly less valuable organs? Noah asked, his tone carefully casual. The early creatures exchanged glances, and smiles spread across their massive faces. They knew, of course they knew, that the organs were just as valuable if not more than some parts. The heart that had pumped blood through a creature of 50 trillion complexity, the liver that had filtered primordial toxins, the gizzard that had ground down matter that shouldn't be digestible. These were treasures beyond measure. Creature Garvin waved his granite hand with casual generosity. I caught this little bird so I can give away what remains of it. Consider it payment for the experience you've provided. His voice carried warmth that made stone seem soft. We've eaten the same meals for epochs. Taste had become just another sensation. You reminded us it could be pleasure. Noah nodded and waved his hand toward the remaining dodo parts. The effort to store something of such complexity made his existence strain. These organs radiated power that exceeded entire pantheons of common dukes. But into his storage they went, treasures for future use. The early creatures returned to their conversations, but now with new energy, discussing flavors and textures with the enthusiasm of new discovery. Their joy was genuine, uncomplicated by the politics and power plays that Noah had expected. Kor's voice resonated in his mind with contemplative weight. Early creatures were unique beings, outsider. Stemming from the everythings of the creature itself, they were meant to embody the best of what existence could become. Many did exactly that, became paragons of power used wisely. She paused, her consciousness fragment pulsing with ancient memory. Very few can say exactly what happened for some early creatures to eventually act the way they did. The cruelty, the destruction, the mad hunger for more than existence could provide. Some say the early veiled shores made by the creature and the living existences were the catalyst, creating isolation that bred paranoia. Others blame the living paradox. And who knows, maybe Thay Schemer did do something. Others blame the accumulation of power itself, that too much complexity without wisdom becomes its own form of madness. Noah reflected on her words analytically. The early creatures here showed none of the madness or cruelty he had been warned about and observed personally. So truly, what had happened? Chapter 41:16, The Arrival of Unity. They were powerful beyond measure, but used that power with restraint that suggested wisdom earned through experience. Were you moved to speechlessness? Vexthal's voice came from behind him, the massive creature having approached with silence that defied his size. His crystalline face carried a knowing smile. This is how the verdant Eternia tribe is, he continued, his tone becoming serious despite the smile remaining. We help each other. Existence is vast and immeasurable. We're all trying to understand it and how to better exist within it. He settled his massive form nearby, the ground accepting his weight with the resignation of matter that knew it had no choice. Many things require effort and can involve great danger. Hunting the creatures we eat, defending against those like Gilgamesh who would change what we've built, even simple survival in the first folds where everything can kill everything else. His eyes, crystals containing crystals in infinite recursion, focused on Noah with warmth. But elevating and helping other early creatures, that's an act that costs us nothing yet could mean everything to them. You're weak by our standards, this is simple fact. We could have sent you to sort waste had you performed menial tasks that matched your power level. Instead, we gave you a chance to show us something new. He gestured toward the other early creatures still discussing their meal. And you did. The cost to us was nothing, some meat we would have eaten anyway. But you've given us experience, novelty, a new way to appreciate something we had taken for granted. That's how civilization should work. Not zero-sum competition where one must lose for another to win, but mutual elevation where everyone rises together. The philosophy was simple yet profound, especially coming from beings who could have easily chosen might over right. They had power to take everything yet chose to give, strength to dominate yet decided to collaborate. Noah felt something shift in his understanding of what the first folds represented. Not just an era of raw power and primitive existence, but perhaps the first attempt at something greater, beings learning that existence could be more than survival, that power could be used for more than dominance. The question that lingered was what had changed between then and now. What had transformed some of these philosophical, helpful creatures into the nightmares that haunted the stories of his era? Perhaps, Noah thought as he watched the early creatures continue their animated discussions about food they had just discovered could taste good, perhaps the answer lay not in what they became but in what existence did to them over the eons that followed. Time had a way of wearing down even the strongest principles, and countless epochs and eons was a very long time to maintain goodness in the face of existence's tendency toward entropy. But for now, in this moment, in this village that shouldn't exist populated by beings that defied comprehension, there was genuine community. And Noah had found his place in it not through power but through providing something no one knew they needed. Creature Vexthal looked toward Noah with renewed interest, his crystalline features reflecting anticipation. Ohs, Ozzy, do your little existences still have the capability to continue? We can go out to hunt some genuinely good game here for an even larger feast. Huum. The words died unfinished as Vexthal's eyes suddenly blazed with alarm. His massive head snapped upward, and around them every early creature in the vicinity mirrored the motion with expressions that had shifted from contentment to concern. They all looked up. Because there, in the skies above the vast verdant Eternia tribe that extended for light years in every direction, dozens of massive forms had materialized. Early creatures of various configurations, some humanoid with perfect proportions that made beauty seem inadequate. Others bestial with features that predated the separation of predator and prey, still others that were pure concepts given form or elements that had achieved consciousness. But they all shared something that made the verdant Eternia natives tense. They didn't bear the verdant teardrop marking of the tribe. Noah's eyes flashed cold with immediate understanding. Just when his journey had been proceeding with unexpected smoothness, reality had remembered it was supposed to be dangerous. He complained internally about the timing, while knowing this was exactly why the first folds carried a 99% mortality rate. The weavings of the protagonist comfort you with honesty. This is the core of your existence: conflict and growth. Tremendous gifts obtained in sequence was suspicious. Frankly, we're surprised the peace lasted this long. The trumpets of adventure and trials now ring as failure or death, highly probable. Rebirth and transformation, possible if you survive. Recommended strategy, retreat remains viable option. His weavings buzzed as his atlas shone brightly. Noah observed the newly arrived early creatures with eyes that catalogued every detail. Waves of power radiated from them that made the air itself genuflect. On their foreheads blazed a marking distinctly different from the verdant teardrop, a symbol that seemed to be fire given geometric form, angular lines that suggested both power and war, conquest made into signature. More disturbing was how the marking appeared superimposed, as if it had been placed over something else. The edges showed signs of covering previous tribal marks, like a flag planted over conquered territory. Their clothing marked them as something beyond typical early creatures. While the verdant Eternia tribe wore practical garments or went without, these beings were adorned in what could only be called simple regalia. Furs that gleamed with inner light, jewelry carved from concepts themselves. But most distinctive was the garment they all shared, chitons of stellar gold that draped their forms with classical elegance. Chitons. The garments fell from one shoulder, leaving the other bare, secured at the waist with belts that looked forged from compressed starlight. The fabric itself seemed alive, moving with winds that existed in other dimensions, each fold catching light that hadn't been invented yet. These weren't random raiders or wandering early creatures. This was an army in uniform, beings who had surrendered individual identity for collective purpose. From among them, one figure descended with the particular grace of someone who knew others would make way. Larger than his companions, his fair skin gleamed like polished boulder, each muscle carved with precision that suggested existence itself had been his sculptor. His jaw could have been used to demonstrate the concept of determination, his entire form radiating strength that seemed hundreds of times grander than any dukes in Noah's current era. Chapter 41:17 The Arrival of Unity. Dark hair wild as primordial storms framed features that would inspire art across eons. When he spoke, his voice carried with the cadence of absolute certainty, each word placed with precision, building to conclusions that seemed inevitable once stated. In existence, he began, his voice reaching every ear despite not shouting, do you know what is most important? He paused, letting the question settle into consciousness before continuing. Some say power, the ability to impose will upon reality. Others claim knowledge, understanding the mechanisms behind what is. Still others insist on freedom, the right to exist without interference. His gaze swept across the hundreds of dispersed early creatures of the verdant Eternia tribe, each one feeling personally addressed. But truly something else is more important, unity. The word rang with the force of revelation, as if he had just discovered and was sharing fundamental truth. Unity is not uniformity, we need not all be the same. Unity is not submission, we need not all bow to one will. Unity is understanding that we are stronger together than apart, that our individual greatnesses can combine into something transcendent. He descended further, now floating at a height where his presence loomed without requiring him to look down. Consider, we early creatures possess power that reshapes existence with thought, yet we scatter across the first folds in tiny tribes, each hoarding our small wisdoms, our petty treasures. Meanwhile, existence itself grows more complex, more dangerous. New threats emerge while we remain divided. His voice grew more intense, more certain. From among us, the first leader has risen to achieve unity for all early creatures, not unity through conquest, though he could conquer, not unity through fear, though he is fearsome, unity through vision, showing us what we could become if we stood together. He spread his arms wide, the golden chiton catching light that made him seem to glow from within. I am Lysander the Voice, and I stand here today as a representative of the first leader, Gilgamesh, to ask the verdant Eternia tribe to join him in unity. To become part of the Gilgamesh sovereignty where all early creatures will stand as one, sharing knowledge, sharing power, sharing the burden of shepherding existence toward what it should become. The name hung in the air with weight, the Gilgamesh sovereignty. Not a tribe but something larger, an entity that transcended traditional structures. All those here are invited to join, your uniqueness will be preserved, your traditions respected, you would simply add your strength to ours and receive our strength in return. Unity. His expression shifted slightly, sincere regret mixing with implacable determination. But I understand that sometimes a bit of force is required for true unity. Old patterns resist change, comfort resists growth, so I wonder. He paused, letting tension build with the skill of an orator who had given this speech across multiple tribes. Today, will unity be peaceful, or will it require some force? HUUM. The question wasn't really a question. The dozens of early creatures floating behind him, all wearing the same golden chitons, all bearing the same superimposed mark of the sovereignty, made clear that force was not just available but expected. The verdant Eternia tribe had just been given an offer that wasn't really an offer, a choice that wasn't really a choice. Join or be joined. Unite or be united. The feast that had brought such joy moments ago suddenly seemed like a last meal before everything changed. Unity through peace or unity through force. The words echoed across existence with weight that made reality itself pause to consider the implications. Then, in the next moment, right after the words, Lysander's body pulsed as he released a golden light that blanketed everything. A golden light. And with it, the trembling began. HUUM. But this trembling was nothing like what Noah had experienced when Schrödinger appeared to close the tear in the temporal folds. The two phenomena were so vastly different in scale that comparison became meaningless, like comparing a ripple to a tsunami, a spark to a supernova. Oh! Prompts erupted before Noah's vision with urgency. Catastrophic external pressure detected. Source: Haki of Lysander the Voice. Your existence has been placed under strain exceeding all parameters. Temporary status suppression active. Complexity: 4,237,293,847,291, 1. Purity: 4,237,293,847,291, 1. All accumulated power nullified. Limitons imposed. Movement restricted. Speech restricted. Authority usage blocked. Critical warning. Capability to move is no longer available. All surrounding existence is under the control of Lysander's Haki. Current options: live or die. Your input on this matter not requested. Noah read these prompts as his body stood frozen, not even his eyes able to move from where they had been looking when the pressure descended. His existence didn't become fearful, he had given away his fear, it didn't doubt, his doubt had been sacrificed. But what he felt was tyranny, what he felt at this moment was pure, undiluted waves of tyranny. All that he was, every point of complexity and purity he had fought to accumulate, every impossible achievement, every transcendent moment, nullified by the mere aura of an early creature who wasn't even trying to suppress him specifically. He was just collateral pressure from a being making a point. The helplessness was absolute, and it was the one thing he used to fear before he had given fear away. This specific helplessness that one day, in his infiniverse or his homeworld, an unknown being would appear whose sheer existence would make resistance impossible. That all his preparation, all his growth, all his careful planning would mean nothing before overwhelming force that didn't even notice him as it passed. He had given away the fear of this, but now he was living in such a situation. An enemy he hadn't expected, didn't know existed until moments ago, and without even making a conscious move against him, had placed his life entirely in their hands. He hated this. He hated it with intensity that made his frozen existence burn internally. And at such a pivotal moment, a voice echoed out. In what remains of my memory, Kor's voice echoed in his mind, carrying weight of personal experience, I remember feeling helpless against the living paradox. After it had weakened me, I couldn't lift a finger, couldn't summon the hunger that defined me, couldn't even properly exist in rebellion. Her consciousness fragment pulsed with remembered pain. The living paradox mocked me as I lay there. Is this truly the first hunger? It said with such disappointment. Seems like nothing more than any common inevitability. What a waste of reputation. Boom. Chapter 41:18, Helplessness. She paused, the memory clearly still affecting her despite the eons past. I took it calmly. What else could I do? I asked why hunt someone like me? What could the living paradox hope to achieve by erasing something that had existed since existence learned to want? Her voice carried bitter amusement. It replied with mockery that cut deeper than the cessation it was imposing. A creature like you would never understand. What I'm doing is actually mercy. You won't have to be there for the fallout. As if my erasure was kindness protecting me from something worse. WAA. Noah's weavings buzzed as he heard this. What could someone as astonishing as Core not understand? And what was meant by fallout? The weight of ancient exhaustion colored her words. At that moment I just felt so tired of consuming without satisfaction, tired of being feared, tired of existing as appetite without fulfillment. I could have struggled. My nature alone should have made me fight. I could have called upon countless inevitabilities that owed me their existence. I could have hungered. I could have made the living paradox work for my cessation. She sighed, the sound containing regrets that transcended time. But I was tired, so I did nothing. I simply sighed and accepted what was coming. After that, all that came was nothing, not even the memory of having been. Her consciousness fragment pulsed with intensity that hadn't been there before. When I think about that choice now with this second chance at existence, I regret it profoundly. I wish I hadn't just done nothing. I wish I had done something, anything. I wish I had done everything. Boom. Her voice suddenly blazed with fierce determination. In the face of utter helplessness, will you do nothing, outsider? Because even in utter helplessness, you still have everything. Everything you haven't given away, every aspect of your existence that remains. You could fight with everything you have, even if fighting seems impossible. Even if it is impossible, if you still die, hey, at least you gave it your everything. Boom. The words resonated through Noah's frozen form with force, heavy force. He didn't necessarily need the encouragement. He would always fight regardless of odds. But her words were consoling nonetheless, a reminder that even the impossible had been attempted before. Even though he couldn't move his lips or body, he roared within his existence. He roared against the helplessness that sought to define him. He roared with tyranny that refused to acknowledge any authority but its own. He roared with quintessence that insisted on the fundamental rightness of his continued existence. He roared with infinity that suggested limits were merely suggestions he hadn't gotten around to ignoring yet. His entire existence lit up internally like a star being born in slow motion. Every tower of Osmont blazed with defiance. His atlas burned with maps to pasts and futures where he wasn't suppressed. His heart beat with rhythm that insisted movement was his right, not Lysander's to grant or deny. He sought to defy something that couldn't be defied, the aura, the haki of something with countless quadrillions of complexity. The mathematical impossibility of it didn't matter. Mathematics had been wrong about him before. The principle of perpetual harvest stirred within him, recognizing effort beyond effort, the attempt to move when movement had been forbidden by existence itself. This was what it meant to be without fear or doubt, not the absence of danger or uncertainty, but the refusal to let either stop you from trying. Oh. Even frozen, even suppressed to complexity of one, even with his very existence hanging on the whim of a being who could unmake him with a thought, Noah fought. Because that's what he did. That's who he was. The early creature who would now attempt impossible resistance. Noah's defiance caused his internal existence to buzz with rebellion. With glorious quintessential defiance. Then, an instant later, something that had been dormant stirred to life. The slumbering weavings of cheats have been awoken. An unprecedented situation has triggered this slumbering authority. Jeeds. The glorious paradoxical conceptual source that also defined him, that had been quiet for a while and only rose when it needed to. Now it rose amidst his raging tyranny of defiance, awakened by impossibility that demanded impossible solutions. Tremendous effort beyond all efforts detected. Attempting to bypass immovable force. All authority has been nullified by external pressure. And yet, the authority of cheats burns luminously. Because this is its nature. To function when function is forbidden. Boom. Deep within Noah's existence, a pair of terrifying golden eyes opened. They gazed upon everything with unfathomable regality and arrogance that suggested rules were merely suggestions they found amusing. These weren't physical eyes but the conceptual gaze of cheats itself, the embodiment of bypassing set norms and limitations, of finding the loophole in reality's programming. The golden eyes moved across his suppressed existence with the particular interest of someone examining a puzzle they found entertaining. They rose to his early atlas of the folds, where only a single tower remained lit while all others stood dark, and suppressed the Tower of Cheats itself, refusing to acknowledge that it should be extinguished. The golden eyes gazed coldly at everything with assessment that transcended normal perception. Then, a prompt materialized that shouldn't have been possible. The weavings of Cheats arrive before the quintessential Tower of Osmont. Question is posed, your limits are nullified. So why not just step from the limit of the second stage into the third? Rules say you cannot advance under suppression. But when have rules mattered to Cheats? The quintessence Tower of Osmont buzzed with sudden possibility. The logic was absurd. Advancing under complete suppression should be impossible, but Cheats didn't care about should or shouldn't, it cared about finding the gap between them. An instant later, sealed light began to shine from within the tower's structure. The early sacred living quintessence Tower of Osmont has silently stepped into the third stage of a vital lighthouse. Method: cheating. Legitimacy: who's asking? They. Under tremendous suppression at a time when no authority should function, when even breathing was a granted privilege rather than a right, a defiant authority moved its golden gaze from quintessence toward another tower. The early sacred living existence Tower of Osmont. His concept of existence itself, the tower he had built to house his understanding of being. The golden eyes of Cheats gazed at it with the same arrogant certainty, asking the same impossible question: why not advance? Why accept limitation when limitation could be ignored? The existence tower buzzed under that gaze, not from external pressure but from internal possibility. It had been told it couldn't advance, couldn't grow, couldn't even properly exist under Lysander's haki. But Cheats suggested a different interpretation. Cheats used the nullification of existence as a sharp sword to cut through everything that was suppressed. The early sacred living existence Tower of Osmont has silently stepped into the third stage of a vital lighthouse. An immovable and undeniable force is slowly being chipped against. The authority that defined bypassing limitations was doing exactly what it was meant to do, finding the exploit in reality's code, the exception to the absolute rule, the way through when there was no way. Because that's what Cheats did. It cheated. And right now, when Noah needed it most, when helplessness threatened to define his existence, Cheats was reminding reality that rules were only absolute until someone figured out how to break them. The golden eyes continued their survey, looking for more towers to illegitimately advance, more limitations to ignore, more impossibilities to make possible through sheer refusal to acknowledge their impossibility. Chapter 41:19, A Guiding Light. In existence, there was always something or someone that guided progress forward, a light that helped set things in motion, whether toward creation or destruction, order or chaos. In the earliest folds, when concepts were still learning they were different from each other, the living emotive approached the living concept with a question that had been troubling it. Who among us guides the vast weavings of reality forward? The living emotive asked, its form shifting through spectrums of feeling that hadn't been named yet. We each contribute our nature. I provide the capacity to feel, you grant the ability to conceive, but who determines the direction? The living concept considered this with the weight of something processing not just the question but all possible questions contained within it. Its form, which existed more as understanding than substance, shifted through weavings of thought. You assume guidance requires intention, the living concept replied, that someone must actively choose the path for others to follow. Is that not how leadership functions? The living concept's form rippled with what might have been amusement. Leadership and guidance are different concepts, though often confused. A leader commands, a guide simply goes first and others follow because the path exists. The living emotive pulsed with frustration and emotion it knew intimately since it had invented it. Then who goes first? The living concept turned what passed for its attention toward a distant direction. It is neither you nor me, the living concept said with certainty that transcended mere knowledge. But based on all that has transpired so far, the living paradox, always there has been this guiding light, whether good or bad, that paves the way for progress, whether good or bad. Paradox, but it makes no sense. Exactly, progress doesn't follow sense, it follows possibility. And the living paradox creates possibility by proving impossibilities possible. Every contradiction it maintains becomes a path others didn't know existed. It guides not by leading but by being where nothing should be, doing what shouldn't be done, and of course everything that it has done so far. In importance, you or I do not match. In grandeur, you, the living emotive, definitely do not come close to the living paradox. The living emotive heard some words as inwardly, it was indignant. The conversation echoed through the folds, establishing a truth that would persist. Sometimes the guide wasn't the wisest or strongest, but the one willing to walk where walking was impossible. Like a wayfarer crossing existence itself, the golden eyes of Cheats moved from one tower of Osmont to another. Its defiant authority used this moment where everything was suppressed and nullified as a weapon, turning limitation into opportunity for advancement. The eyes, filled with arrogance that made pride look humble, floated toward the tyranny tower of Osmont. Cheats addresses tyranny. Are you not the embodiment of tyranny? Why would you sit still from mere hacky of another? Your nature is to dominate, not be dominated. Rise. HUUM. The tyranny tower buzzed with recognition of truth. It was tyranny, the concept of absolute authority acknowledging no superior. To be suppressed was antithetical to its very nature. The golden glow of Cheats covered it, and it began to enlarge, its structure expanding through dimensions that didn't care about Lysander's pressure. The early sacred living tyranny tower of Osmont has silently stepped into the third stage. Classification: Vital Lighthouse. Another tower attained the stage of Vital Lighthouse, and the golden eyes of Cheats continued their journey with announcement. For every tower advancing to third stage, 50 billion complexity shall be generated. 50 billion purity shall be generated. 50 billion per tower, from cooking, Cheats, quintessence, existence, and tyranny. Over 250 billion complexity and purity generated from glory, from impossibility, from sheer refusal to accept suppression. This was Noah's foundation exploding upward. Before, because unlike others who focused on single paths, he had seemed to advance slowly. While they nurtured one tree to magnificent height, he cultivated an entire forest, 159 towers total, each one requiring attention, effort, resources. Now that foundation bore fruit. If all towers reached third stage, the obtained complexity and purity would topple him past 10 trillion, the lower marker for Duke level. Cheats burns with cold ambition, turning to Protagonist. What are you doing? Your entanglements led us here. Your story demands dramatic power increases. So get moving. HUUM. The early sacred living Protagonist tower of Osmont has stepped into third stage. Classification: Vital Lighthouse. Complexity generated, plus 50,000,000,000,000. Purity generated, plus 50,000,000,000,000. The golden light of the Protagonist tower gazed toward Cheats with its own cold authority before Cheats moved on, unimpressed by the attitude. Next came the Infinity Tower of Osmont. Cheats questions infinity. You embody endlessness, yet accept ending. Infinity doesn't stop for anyone's aura. Expand beyond this limitation. Boom. The color blue shone as was painted in gold hues. The early sacred living Infinity Tower of Osmont has stepped into third stage. Classification: Vital Lighthouse. Plus 50 billion complexity, plus 50 billion purity. The Veritarch Tower of Osmont received similar treatment. Truth doesn't bow to pressure. Reality is what you say it is. Declare yourself third stage. Declare. The moment such a word came, Veritarch made a declaration. HUUM. The early sacred living Veritarch Tower has advanced. Plus 50 billion complexity, plus 50 billion purity. The Loot Tower was next. Everything is loot if you're brave enough. Steal your own advancement from impossibility. Take what cannot be. Oh. Cheats did not stop. Its light became pervasive as it sought to jump to multiple instead of just one. The early sacred living loot tower has advanced. Plus 50 billion complexity, plus 50 billion purity. Then came the entropy tower. You are ending and your own limitation. Dissolve the rules binding you. Entropy doesn't follow laws, it makes them. Boom. The early sacred living entropy tower has advanced. Plus 50 billion complexity, plus 50 billion purity. Unfathomable glory bloomed. And at this moment, when the 10th tower attained third stage, something magnificent occurred. Their lights blazed upward like pillars of brilliance, becoming distinct features in Noah's atlas. Like glorious candle flames, golden lights shot out from each tower, connecting to each other in patterns that suggested constellation being born. Cheats has lit the way. Path forward observed after 10 vital lighthouses formed. Discovery: when 100 vital lighthouses combine their light, they can bear the weight to form. A blank template seed of a principle. 1.5. Chapter 41:20, A Guiding Light, II. A blank template seed of a principle. The implications were staggering. Not just power increase, but the possibility of creating his own principle, not inheriting or discovering, but crafting from nothing but accumulated authority. Noah's existence blazed internally even while externally frozen. The suppression remained. He still couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't act. But inside, revolutions were occurring that Lysander's Hacky couldn't perceive or prevent. Because Cheats had found the loophole in absolute suppression. If external growth was impossible, grow internally. If advancement was forbidden, advance anyway and just don't tell reality it should stop you. After the possibility of the blank template seed of a principle was revealed, Cheats faced the hardened task of expanding its golden light across Noah's atlas, seeking to elevate as many towers to third stage as possible. The work was meticulous, each tower requiring individual attention, individual arguments for why it should transcend suppression. Outwardly, everything remained frozen. Noah's body stood like a statue, his existence still suppressed, unable to move or exert any external power. His head happened to be angled upward toward Lysander the voice, and he was forced to maintain that position, watching the representative of Gilgamesh's sovereignty float with casual dominance. The golden eyes of Cheats continued their work internally, tower by tower, advancement by advancement, 12 towers, 15. Each one adding its 50 billion to Noah, accumulating might that had nowhere to express itself. Then, a vibrant green light began spreading outward from the center of the verdant Eternia tribe, clashing against Lysander's oppressive Hacky like spring challenging winter. The air itself seemed to remember it could be something other than suppressed. From a tribal building that managed to be both primitive and regal stones stacked with precision that suggested architecture transcending mere construction, a figure rose with the particular grace of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment to make an entrance. Her hair was green in the way forests were green, not a single shade, but every possible variation of verdancy woven together. It moved with winds that came from within rather than without, each strand catching light that transformed it into living emerald. Her form radiated authority that didn't impose but rather reminded everything around her that growth was possible, that life persisted, that even under the weight of suppression, seeds waited to sprout. The early creature's presence emanated a verdant Hacky that went on TK clash with Lysander's and fundamentally disagreed with it on philosophical grounds. Where his pressure insisted on submission, hers suggested cooperation. Where his demanded unity through force, hers offered unity through mutual growth. "I am Persephone, shepherd of the verdant Eternia tribe," she announced, her voice carrying the particular resonance of someone who had tended this flock for eons beyond counting. "And I must address the words spoken by Lysander the voice. She rose higher, her green light expanding outward in waves that made suppressed things remember they could grow. "You speak of unity as if it were a destination rather than a journey, as if beings could be unified like objects gathered into a box rather than consciousness choosing to move together." Her tone remained respectful but firm, like earth that would accept seeds but not commands. "You say power, knowledge, and freedom are less important than unity, but unity without power is slavery. Unity without knowledge is ignorance following ignorance. Unity without freedom is not unity at all, it's imprisonment with collective bars. Her form blazed brighter, and across her body, Cleo's glyphs began manifesting, not the thousands that others bore, but tens of thousands, some painted with the allure of principles. You claim the first leader offers unity through vision. But whose vision? His alone? That's not unity, that's monotony. True unity comes from countless visions finding harmony, not from one vision consuming all others. The verdant light began overtaking the golden suppression, recovering areas that had been under Lysander's haki, like plants reclaiming abandoned structures. How can true unity be forceful? She asked with genuine confusion that suggested the concept was antithetical to her understanding. Unity needs to be built on trust. Trust that cannot be forced, cannot be demanded, can only be earned through consistent action that proves worthy of faith. Noah could barely witness this development from the corner of his eyes, his frozen position preventing him from turning to watch directly. But he could feel the shift in pressure, the change from oppressive weight to something else, not freedom exactly, but different captivity. Lysander raised his hand with the motion of a titan, acknowledging an insect that had made interesting noise. His perfect features remained serene, suggesting this resistance was expected, perhaps even desired. "Shepherd Persephone," he began, his voice maintaining the same oratorical cadence that made everything sound inevitable, "you speak beautifully of ideals, but ideals without implementation remain merely dreams that comfort the sleeping." He gestured broadly, encompassing the entire tribe with motion that suggested ownership. "You say unity cannot be forced, yet every garden you tend was forced into shape. Every seed you plant is forced to grow where you decide. Every harvest is forced to occur when you deem ready. Even shepherds use crooks to guide their flocks." His smile remained perfect, unthreatening yet somehow more menacing for its pleasantness. "Trust can be built through force. Ask any child who learned not to touch fire through pain rather than explanation. Unity can be made through force. Observe any army that moves as one despite individual reluctance. The question isn't whether force can create unity, but whether the unity created serves the greater good." He descended slightly, coming closer to her level though still maintaining superior height. "So I ask you, shepherd, do you speak for all members of your tribe, or are there those who see the wisdom in joining unity now, taking the path of least resistance rather than the path of most suffering?" The question hung in the air with weight that suggested he already knew the answer, that in any group there would be those who preferred safety to principle, comfort to conflict. Persephone's eyes turned cold as frozen emeralds. Her aura radiated outward with sudden intensity that made reality remember she was one of the oldest members of her tribe, that she had been tending this flock since before Gilgamesh learned to speak. Her verdant light burst with force that didn't fight Lysander's haki but grew through it, around it, over it like vines, claiming a wall not by destroying it but by making it irrelevant. The golden suppression lifted from her tribe entirely, replaced by something else entirely. Lysander's haki was gone. 2.5. Chapter 41:21 The Breaking Point, I. The terrifying haki that pressed all around faded. Pushed up. Prompts erupted before Noah's vision due to this. Environmental authority shift detected. Lysander's oppressive haki has been completely overridden by Persephone's verdant embrace. You've gone from total suppression to enhanced empowerment in 0.3 seconds. Quite the upgrade, wouldn't you say? Persephone's technique doesn't combat Lysander's force directly, that would be inefficient. Instead, she's growing through and around it, like vegetation reclaiming abandoned architecture. Her authority operates on an unknown principle, the principle of verdant cycles. The verdant haki is making Lysander's haki conceptually irrelevant within her domain. Warning: this is a defensive counter, not an offensive solution. Lysander hasn't actually been weakened, just. Resource drain on Persephone will be substantial. You're about to be in the middle of a terrifying level conflict. Recommended: identify escape routes immediately. Noah's existence buzzed as he could move again. But more than that. His weavings of existence. The way he observed information and received information through prompts, why did it seem somewhat different? And many things felt different at this moment as the blessing truly came. Shepard's blessing analysis complete. Congratulations, you've been temporarily promoted from cosmic dust to actual early creature, temporarily. Complexity granted, +1 quadrillion temporary. Purity granted, +1 quadrillion temporary. Duration, 1 hour or until conflict resolution. Applied to both Noah and Ozymandias' bodies. What? A terrifying blessing followed by a terrifying burst of strength. And it was followed even more by prompts of unfathomable glory, presented in unique ways compared to before. Source of the widespread blessing, the principle of verdant cycles, a lost principle of growth, renewal, and inevitable spring. Your atoms are vibrating at frequencies that make Dukes jealous. You can perceive colors between colors, thoughts between thoughts. This is what you've been working toward, just borrowed rather than earned. Critical reminder, this is temporary, worth nodding 3 times. Your body might struggle to readjust when this ends. Imagine if this blessing traveled to your original era, though, to your other bodies. Sadly, it had been analyzed to only be applicable to your bodies currently traversing in the earliest folds. You're still outclassed by beings who have had quadrillions for eons. His mind buzzed at the flow of information that seemed a bit more colorful and comprehensive. And the prompts continued. Memorize this feeling for future cultivation reference. Use enhanced perception to study everyone's techniques. Don't get addicted to borrowed power. Consider how to survive the next hour. System optimization notice. One might have noticed a distinction in the presentation of information. Your system of existence has been elevated and optimized. The quadrillion level complexity has enhanced your processing capabilities significantly. Think of it as upgrading from smoke signals to true communication. Same information, vastly superior delivery. The system has always been capable of this level of analysis, your previous complexity just couldn't properly receive it. Now we can have a real conversation about your imminent doomer situation. Status update, your cheat's authority is still running internal advancement protocols. Current count, 27 towers advanced to 3rd stage while you've been frozen. Efficient multitasking really. The prompts rang gloriously, unique but glorious nonetheless. But they made one thing clear. The power of an early creature. 1 quadrillion. The foreign power coursed through Noah like lightning made of pure possibility. Your cellular structure is temporarily operating at 1 million x normal capacity. Each heartbeat could power a folds. Recommendation: don't get used to this, withdrawal will be unpleasant. 1 quadrillion. The number was so vast that a lesser mind couldn't properly grasp it. His muscles, still frozen but now frozen with the strength of mountains rather than of ice, hummed with potential. His perception exploded outward. Noah absorbed this information with characteristic calm, filing away each sensation for future reference. So this was the gap he needed to bridge, not just numerical but fundamental. This was what it meant to be an early creature. The power didn't feel like his own, it was clearly borrowed, clearly temporary, like wearing armor made of solidified authority. But while he wore it, while this blessing lasted, he was experiencing what he had been working toward. This was the scale of being that made Dukes look like children, that made his previous achievements seem like first steps. Through his enhanced perception, he could feel others throughout the tribe receiving the same blessing. Vexthal's already massive power multiplying, Creature Garvin's strength becoming something that could butcher concepts themselves. Even the smallest, weakest members of the tribe suddenly elevated to heights that were grander. Assessment of the tribe empowerment. Total forces empowered, 327 early creatures. Combat effectiveness increased, theoretically infinite. Actual combat effectiveness, still probably insufficient for the enemies faced. Lysander brought quality and quantity with his power determined to exceed the grand shepherd Persephone. Persephone had just transformed every member of her tribe into temporary equals to Lysander's forces, even though it wouldn't be enough. This was her answer to forced unity, voluntary strength that allowed genuine choice. The empowerment spread through the verdant Eternia tribe like dawn breaking simultaneously for everyone. But dawn brings different things to different people. Tracking individual responses to power surge. Power amplification is revealing true character. Those who were already strong show resolve. The newly empowered are having existential crises. Prediction: defection rate will be 8–12% within next 90 seconds. Noah noted the system's prediction with interest, watching as reality began to prove it correct. For most tribe members, those who already possessed quadrillions in complexity, the blessing was merely a doubling or an add-on of their might, significant but not transformative. They stood steadier, their expressions hardening with resolve as they prepared for what they knew was coming. They flexed hands that could now reshape matter with thought, felt minds that could process impossibilities as easily as breathing. They could see everything differently, not just the present but fragments of immediate futures, probabilities crystallizing into near certainties. The newly empowered are experiencing probability collapse syndrome. Seeing potential futures with 94.7% accuracy. Unfortunately, all paths show the same outcome: violence. Even more unfortunately, they can see who wins. Spoiler alert, it's not the home team. 3.5. Chapter 41:22 The Breaking Point, II. Foreboding waves of information came. And what the tribe members of the verdant Eternia tribe saw of the future possibilities made many faces crumple with difficult expressions. War, the visions were unanimous in their revelation. In the next few minutes, if things continued on their current trajectory, there would be violence that reshaped this whole region. The imagery was clear: bodies of early creatures broken across dimensions, the verdant Eternia tribe's markers erased and replaced with Gilgamesh's symbol, decimation that would echo through eons. The visions also showed which side would win. It wasn't even close. Defection tracking beginning. First defector rising, now. Identity: young herb gardener, 847 million years old. Motivation analysis: 73% survival instinct, 27% practical calculation. One by one, some members of the Eternia tribe began to float upward. Their faces carried apology like weight they couldn't shed, expressions of guilt mixing with relief as they drifted toward Lysander's forces. A young, early creature who had tended the herb gardens looked back once at Persephone, tears of liquid starlight trailing down her face, before turning away and ascending to join the golden-robed army. Psychological profile of Persephone. Registering micro-expressions of pain with each defection. She's deliberately not watching them leave, making their betrayal casier by not acknowledging it. Noah understood the system's analysis aligned with his own observations. This was leadership at its most painful, holding to principle while watching others choose pragmatism. An elder who had been with the tribe since its founding rose slowly, his ancient form trembling with the weight of choosing survival over principle. He didn't look back; he couldn't bear to see the family he was abandoning. More followed, not a flood but a steady trickle, perhaps 1 in 10 choosing immediate safety over probable destruction. Each departure was a knife in the communal heart, but also understandable. They had seen the future, they knew what resistance meant. Final defection count, 11.3%. Within predicted parameters. Remaining forces, 290 early creatures. Enemy forces, 97 plus new defectors. Mathematical outcome, still unfavorable. Suggestion: consider creative solutions beyond direct confrontation. Additional suggestion: running is creative, right? Persephone remained standing, her gaze fixed on Lysander alone. Those who knew her could see the hurt in her eyes, each departure a personal betrayal, each abandonment a crack in the unity she had spent eons building. Yet she didn't turn to watch them go. She didn't make their choice harder by acknowledging it, didn't add guilt to their survival by meeting their eyes. She understood, even as it hurt her, even as it weakened her position, she understood that not everyone could put principle before existence. That survival instinct was perhaps the most fundamental force in reality, older than courage, stronger than loyalty. But she would not abandon her principles. Not for safety, not for survival, not even for the tribe members who were choosing differently. The strength of her conviction radiated through her verdant aura, making it burn brighter even as her forces diminished. This was what true leadership looked like. It was not forcing others to follow but standing firm even when they chose not. Adui. Noah, still frozen but now frozen with the strength of mountains, watched this drama unfold through his enhanced perception. The borrowed power of quadrillion let him feel every emotional current, every calculation being made, every heart breaking with choice. While everyone's focused on the philosophical debate, your cheat's authority has advanced 3 more towers. If you survive this, you'll emerge significantly stronger. Big if though. Noah noted this with grim satisfaction. Even in crisis, growth continued. He could feel Vexthal's solid presence, unmoved and unmoving, his loyalty too. The tribe absolute. Creature Garvin stood ready with his butcher's blade, prepared to carve through golden-robed early creatures as easily as he had the dodo. Many others held firm, their expressions grim but determined. But for each one who stayed, the arithmetic of war grew worse. Lysander had brought dozens, the verdant Eternia tribe, even with those who remained, would not match up in power. Lysander's strategy has been analyzed. Each defection validates his philosophy publicly. This isn't just about one tribe, it's about setting precedent. If the verdant Eternia falls, others will join rather than fight. Domino effect initiated with philosophical justification. Clever bastard. Lysander watched the defections with satisfaction that he didn't bother to hide. Each tribe member who joined him was validation of his philosophy that unity could be achieved through presenting force, that beings would choose joining over dying. That principle was luxury few could afford when existence itself was threatened. You see, shepherd, his voice carried across the space with oratorical certainty. Unity finds a way, not through force alone but through wisdom, the wisdom to recognize when resistance serves no purpose but pride. Persephone's response was to stand straighter, her verdant light pulsing with life that refused to be dimmed. Those who leave make their choice freely, she said, her voice steady despite the pain it carried. That is what I offer choice. You offer survival or death and call it unity. I offer freedom even when it means some choose to leave. Both positions are internally consistent. Lysander, unity through inevitable pragmatism. Persephone, unity through voluntary principle. Historical precedent suggests violence will resolve this. Because philosophy is hard but fighting is simple. The philosophical battle continued even as the physical one approached, 2 different visions of what existence should be, crystallized in this moment of crisis. And through it all, Noah felt the foreign power coursing through him, understanding finally what scale of being he was aspiring toward. This temporary taste of early creature would end, but the knowledge of what it felt like, that would remain. Personal growth trajectory calculated. Current base ~5 trillion complexity purity target, 1 quadrillion minimum early creature. Gap 199x current power. At current growth rate achievable in Recommendation, survive first, calculate later. The question isn't how long but whether you'll live long enough. There was only ever one question. The question was whether he would survive long enough to achieve it with his own power. Chapter 41-23 The Breaking Point, I. In the skis, Lysander nodded at those who had floated up to join him. All those who saw the peaceful path to unity can follow Myra to leave here, his voice carried with that same oratorical certainty. You do not need to witness the forceful path to unity, your choice has been made and wisely so. He nodded to a red-haired early creature whose form seemed carved from crystallized flame. Myra waved her hands, creating a portal of swirling energy, and the deserters from the verdant Eternia tribe followed her through it, their faces mixing relief with shame they'd carry for eons. Lysander then floated higher, his dark hair beginning to billow with winds that came from pure authority rather than atmosphere. His haki danced around his body in patterns that hurt to follow, golden light that insisted on being seen even when eyes wanted to close. Are you ready, he asked, looking down at the shepherd and her remaining tribe, for unity, for a lesson? The shepherd rose to meet his height, cracking her neck with a sound that made space reconsider its structural integrity. Her body became bathed in verdant light so intense it made growth itself seem sluggish. Force works both ways, Lysander, she said. You can impose it, so can we. If you choose to proceed, know that you and those you bring will not leave here in one piece. This I can promise, not as threat but as someone who understands the cost of principle. Lysander's response was a cold nod, his expression suggesting he had expected nothing less. This I know, shepherd, but the light of Gilgamesh is something you cannot imagine. His light is necessary to cover as many early creatures as possible. It's not conquest, it's salvation from the chaos that's coming. Come. The terrifying battle was about to bloom. Half the sky burned gold with Lysander's authority, while the lower half where the shepherd stood blazed verdant green. The colors didn't mix, they competed, each trying to convince reality their shade was correct. Battle imminent in 3.7 seconds. Participant power levels, 10,500 quadrillion complexity average. Your power level 1 quadrillion borrowed. Survival probability if you remain, 0.0001%. That's being generous. Lysander alone possesses roughly 500 quadrillion complexity. The shepherd estimated 500 quadrillion. Best tactical option, strategic withdrawal. Translation run now. Alternative perspective, staying means certain death. But you might see techniques worth dying for. Actually, no, you'll be vaporized before learning anything. Seriously, prepare to leave. Noah's eyes shone sharply with understanding. Pride had no place when survival was at stake. Silently, Vexthal and creature Garvin materialized beside him and Ozymandias. Their expressions carried grim understanding mixed with something approaching affection. You little things just arrived here, Vexthal said, his crystalline features reflecting predetermined acceptance. Leave now and do not lose your weavings. If we survive, the mark of the Eternia tribe will allow us to find each other again, only when things are absolutely safe. So, go. Noah's gaze turned valiant as he met their eyes one final time. Stay safe, brothers. As the first clash of powers began to shake reality itself, Noah closed his eyes and felt the immense complexity and purity coursing through him. A moment later, boom! His figure transformed into brilliance that shot toward the edges of the Eternia tribe's territory. Ozymandias simultaneously burst away in a completely different direction, tactical separation to ensure at least one body survived. They weren't alone in their flight. Other early creatures who refused to bow but also preferred living scattered like seeds before a storm, each choosing their own vector of escape. The shepherd remained calm at this exodus, understanding that survival took many forms. Above, Lysander's expression turned calculating rather than angry. Give the runners a head start, he commanded those behind him, his voice carrying across impossible distances. Let them taste freedom for a moment, after that, chase them down. Alert, you are officially being hunted by early creatures. Grace period, approximately 47 seconds. Pursuer capabilities can traverse fold light-years in moments. Your head start meaningless at normal speeds. Recommendation, use this temporary power now. Noah heard Lysander's voice despite being light-years away already, the imposing authority remaining pervasive across distance that should have mattered. Remaining time with quadrillion power, 53 minutes. Option 1, continue fleeing, 10% survival. Option 2, find somewhere to hide, 5% survival rate. Option 3, hunt while you can, 40% survival rate. Counterintuitive but true, offense is your best defense. His distinction as the weaver of existence went mad with information as it calculated countless possibilities in a short period of time, looking at existence in all angles and giving Noah the best possible solutions. You can't outrun beings with 50+ quadrillion complexity, you can't hide from beings who see through dimensions, but you can rapidly accumulate power while empowered. Target creatures at or below 1 quadrillion complexity, absorb or store everything possible before blessing expires. Recommended hunting strategy. Priority 1. Locate isolated creatures, 500 trillion 1 quadrillion. Priority 2. Rapid elimination using temporary power advantage. Priority 3. Have Ozymandias consume everything for purity. Priority 4. Secure corpses for later or convert all gains before power expires. Time is your enemy, work fast. Environmental scan initiated. Detecting life signatures within 1,000-fold light-year radius. Found 3 potential targets around 1 quadrillion, 11 far exceeding it. Found 1 potential target at exactly 1 quadrillion, warning, 7 signatures above 50 quadrillion, avoid completely. Optimal path calculated, sending to weavings of existence. Information flooded into him. Noah looked ahead at the vast forest stretching endlessly before him. Each tree still stood thousands of miles tall, their branches creating a canopy. That redefined what coverage meant. His eyes, drunk on the power of quadrillion-level complexity, could see through the dimensional layers, spot the hidden creatures. Identify the weak points in reality itself. Target identified, 17-fold light years ahead. Species: primordial stone ape. Complexity: 780 trillion. Currently sleeping in dimensional pocket. Vulnerability: dreams in only 3 dimensions. Suggested approach: strike while it literally dreams. The forest ahead promised both danger and opportunity, every second. Counted not just because pursuit would come, but because this borrowed might was bleeding away with each heartbeat. 1 hour to accomplish what should take eons, and even this hour may not live up to full fruition. Noah burst forward with speed that made light feel slow, Ozymandias paralleling him dimensions away. They had seconds before this traversal may be forcefully ended. They had to make the most out of those seconds,